Well, hi and hello to all the popcorn talkers, and welcome to another episode of Second Way to Kill a Werewolf. My name is Damien, and with me, as always, is my co-host Matthias, the ultimate warrior, Rodriguez. Matthias, how you doing today, man?
Feeling quite ultimate, yes.
Ultimate warrior, in fact.
Yes, ultimate warrior, in fact. But yeah, I'm doing great, Damien. Yeah, how about yourself?
I'm doing all right. And some of you that are watching this episode might be wondering, like, man, how did this guy just come up with that nickname on the top of your head? It's just, I don't know. It's one of those things, I guess. It just jumps right out the page. This is a gift from my niece and nephew for Father's Day. I told them that I would wear it on the next episode. So I just wanted to go ahead and say shout out to you little monsters. And thank you for the shirt. I love it very much. For those of you, though, that are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Silver Bullet Cinema portion of our little show, where we take a look back at some of the greatest movies of our time, as well as some of the not so greatest movies of our time. But hell, we enjoy anyway. We'll go through taglines, casting, fun facts, and follow up with a scene-by-scene breakdown that just might make your next doom scroll for what to watch a little bit easier. So, without any further delay, we're going to jump right into a movie that I'm pretty sure is the reason that you clicked on that video or the episode itself on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or now available on YouTube. We're going to go ahead and jump right into a little movie called Superman. So, Superman came out in 2025 and was directed by none other than James Gunn. And if that name sounds familiar, it's probably because you're also familiar with some of his other hits like, Guardians of the Galaxy, The Suicide Squad, and a little romantic comedy, depending on your perspective, of course, that I just adore, called Slither. And I'll bet some of you were thinking, like, romantic comedy? I don't know what. If you are familiar with his work, you probably started going through your Rolodex of different names that you might try to pull from your memory right there. And I'm betting that Slither was not on your bingo card for being referred to as a romantic comedy, nor should it be, because it's not. It's more of a sci-fi horror, I guess, type of genre. Yes, there are some elements of people, I was going to say, coming together, but in a very more literal sense than anything. If you've ever seen that movie, then you know what I'm talking about. But at one point or another, I think relationships do happen. You know what? I say that.
There's a love story in there. There's a love
Right?
story
Okay,
in
there
it.
is a love.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, there is a love story. And I do want to go back and watch that one again. Sometimes I find myself, I don't know, just a fan of that creature feature type of thing, even though I guess this is more of that sci-fi horror, because I believe the entity ends up coming to Earth, right? It's not something that was like homegrown in the planet, right? If
No,
I'm
yeah,
not
it's
mistaken.
it's from space, as you know. Always these horror entities tend to come from.
Right? Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. um, and it's funny that we should use that as a segue to jump into this movie, because the movie that we're talking about is, yes, it's basically about another alien that crash lands on the planet Earth, just, doesn't come to, I don't know, act as a parasite of any kind. No, in fact, he would actually probably be the one that saves us from some sort of a threat, known as Superman. But with this movie coming out in 2025, which was not that long ago, in fact, there were some other big movies that also came out in that year, because last year was the year that I feel like the theater business, the movie business, started to get some sort of a pulse again. And here we are in 2026, and I think that business is thriving, business is booming, and as long as these people just keep cranking out hit after hit or movie after movie, I think that we're on a path to just normalcy, I guess, as it were. Uh,
Mhm.
Post pandemic and writer strike and all that other stuff. So happy to report that. But the reason I bring up 2025 and it having other movies involved is because before we jump right into the guts and glory of this movie, Superman, we also like to play a little game, which is the other major releases game. I don't know. I haven't come up with a better name for it other than that. Basically, what it is that I'm going to go ahead and go to proceed to name some actors that came out in other major films during that time, such as 2025. Matthias here is going to do his best to guess that film. Doesn't sound like it would be too difficult, right? Well, guess what? I'm not going to be starting off with the main stars. No, no, no. We're a movie podcast, so every now and again we got to flex our muscles and just think a little bit harder than the average folk. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, then stay tuned because here we go. Matthias, the first actor's name that I'm going to go ahead and name is Ed Ed Skrein.
It's already starting off not good.
I'm going to give you a little bit of work here, or a little bonus here. The movie that he came out in was Deadpool Part 1.
Okay, so Ed Screen, Deadpool Part 1. Yeah, I'm gonna pass on this one.
These are tough. Okay, and I kind of got us into this by saying like, yeah, we're gonna flex our muscles because we're a movie podcast and we can do it. I couldn't do this. I'm the one telling you what the actors' names are. I'm telling you
Okay.
right now. As I was looking these up, I was like, if he gets this, he's I don't know. He's at a whole nother level. I don't know what to say because geez, these I wouldn't have been able to come up with this either. So I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle in some not obvious ones, but maybe some others that might stand out. But it's not gonna be on this name. Jonathan Bailey.
Jonathan Bailey. Jonathan Bailey. Oh,
You've got to be kidding me.
Jurassic Park, right?
How the hell did you get that? Who the hell's Jonathan Bailey?
He's involved in the movie. Duh, Damien.
No. That's fair. I don't know how you got that after I named that name, but yes, I was
Yeah.
gonna go with Mahershala Ali after that, and I figured you might have gotten.
I would have
that one
got.
at that
Yeah,
point.
I totally would have gotten it. Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, you did get that wrong though because it's Jurassic World Rebirth. So I'm sorry I can't give you that answer.
Okay.
We're
Well,
gonna move on.
okay.
No, I'm kidding. No, honestly, that's amazing because I there's no way in hell I would have gotten that. I wouldn't have gotten it until Mahershala Ali, and at the very least, the last one. I'm sure you can guess who I was gonna go with after that. Anthony Hopkins. No, Scarlett Johansson was gonna be that one. So we're gonna move on to our second movie here. We've only got two more here. So the next one, Nate Torrance.
Nate Torrance. Nate Torrance. Yeah, it's a name that it's not ringing a bell.
Bonnie Hunt.
That one does. Bonnie Hunt. What is she in? No. Yeah, I'm not getting it.
This one's either really gonna help you or really confuse you. I just want to say that and be clear before I say it. Shakira.
Oh, Zootopia 2, right?
Utopia 2. Very good. That was a good one. All right. I was just kind of like, I don't know if this is gonna help him or hurt him, but I'm gonna say it anyways. All right. Last one, then we're gonna go ahead and move on. I was about to say the name out loud. Wendell Pierce.
Wendell Pierce. I know the actor because I think he's also in he's in Superman.
Is he?
But yeah, he is.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, he is. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Well, give me another name.
Chris Bauer.
Chris Bauer. Chris Bauer. Nah, it's not coming up.
Louis Pullman.
Oh, damn it. Thunderbolts.
Thunderbolts it is.
I had a
Man,
guess
that's
because
impressive.
I had a guess because I was just like, I know that Thunderbolts came out like a week or two before Superman did, and it was actually not a bad movie.
I really enjoyed Thunderbolts, and taste of things to come for where I stand on this movie as I've finally had time to really just watch it again and then really just kind of have time to sit and think about it. I think that I enjoyed Thunderbolts more than I enjoyed Superman.
Oof. That's a hot
Yeah.
take, Damien.
Yeah, we're going to get there, folks. I'm not going to jump too far ahead. We're going to get there. But before we get there, let's go ahead and talk some numbers. So, as I just mentioned, and as Matthias confirmed, Thunderbolts came out a little around the same time as well, which Superman released July 11th, 2025. The runtime was 2 hours and 9 minutes long and had a budget of $225 million. Domestically, it did 354 million. Globally, it did 624 million. Awards, none to speak of. I don't know, number 1 in some people's hearts, I guess, at the very least. Ranking, though, ranking, it ranked as number 10 among the other 2025 releases in terms of global box office performance, as it brought in $618.7 million. Matthias, what do you think was the number 1 movie of 2025 globally?
2025 globally. I'm trying to think what came out there. I know it had to be a sequel to something that did really, really well, which is not coming to me. But am I right in that regard at least? Is it a sequel
Ye
or part of a
yeah,
franchise?
yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Yeah, it's not coming to me though. So tell me.
Zootopia Part 2. It
I was
did,
gonna
one
say that, but I was like, he's not gonna use that movie twice in a questionnaire, but I guess he
Yep.
did. So
If it was true, I gotta be true to myself here on that one. But yeah, Zootopia 2, $1.87 billion. Avatar came in at number 2 with $1.5 billion. And just for a guess, if you can get it, what do you think was the third highest grossing film of globally for 2025?
hmm. I want to say, is it fantastic? Was it Fantastic Four or no?
You know what? No, but that's a good guess. Lilo and Stitch, $1.03 billion.
Oh yeah, I forgot that came out last year. Wow. Oof.
Yeah, yeah, it was good. It was good. I have a feeling this is just a quick prediction. I have a feeling I'm gonna have enjoyed Lilo and Stitch more than I am going to enjoy Moana. Just throwing that out there.
Mm.
Just yeah, not looking good, folks. But a trailer can be bad and the movie great. So here's to hoping. So who was in this movie? Well, this movie had a cast, and I'm talking about Superman, not Lilo and Stitch. This movie had a cast of David Cornsweet as Superman, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, Isabella Merced as Hawk Girl, Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, one of the Green Lanterns, Eddie Gathegi as
Gathegi,
Mr.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, Anthony Kerrigan as Metamorpho, and written and directed by James Gunn, and produced, of course, by James Gunn as well as Peter Safran. All in all, this was a pretty good put together cast on paper. As they were making these announcements, I was looking forward to it, and then especially, I mean, of course, your crown jewel being the announcement of the Superman, who was casted, which was David Cornsweet. And right away, I was like, this guy's got the look. He definitely has the look. Some people were saying, and I among them was thinking he looked like a younger version of Henry Cavill, which I mean, Henry Cavill put the red cape on back in 2013. So yeah, a lot of time has passed since then. With
Mm.
David Cornsweet coming in, not putting anything on Henry Cavill. Don't get me wrong, he looks amazing. He's in great shape. But 13 years is 13 years, and
Yeah.
David Cornsweet did in fact, I feel, look like a younger version of Henry Cavill, which really worked though for this role because overall, I mean, just Henry Cavill is Superman to me. The way that some people probably felt about Christopher Reeve in that generation, I feel the same way about Henry Cavill for this generation. It's just, I don't know, he embodied everything about him. He had the charisma and just everything really. David Cornsweet, we're gonna get to it a little bit later. I was more excited about it or looking forward to it until I saw the performance. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Just didn't really embody the spirit 100% of the character that I imagined in my head, I guess. I don't know. We'll jump on that a little bit more. But regarding taglines for this movie had a few taglines. Those official taglines that came up was the first one being "Look up." What do you feel about that one, Matthias?
I think nice and simple. And I
Yeah,
mean, it does have that double intention to where, like, yeah, you're gonna see Superman in the sky. He's gonna be obviously flying, so you would look up. But also, I think it serves as the whole thing of like him serving as sort of a just a being to look up to. Certainly, he has all those elements about him, of like the sort of like the good old fashionedness of his ability and him being a caring kind of person as well too. I think that's another way to sort of like frame it there. So I think it's a good one. I think they chose a really decent one there.
yeah. Look up was right there with, I feel, the idea of look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. So it was kind
Yeah.
of like a throwback to that, but also not going too nostalgic with it. So look up worked for me. I thought it was overall good. Second tagline: truth justice, and the human way. Now, for those of you that are familiar with this character, probably thought it was truth, justice, and the American way, which was another way that another quote from another movie that always stood out to me from Lost Boys, where they just say that. Did that have any relevance here? Not really, other than the fact of quoting the line. And the reason why I always remember that is because, yeah, that was the original comic run, and I don't know if that really came out in any of the cinematic versions. Maybe in the one with Christopher Reeve, but I don't really recall. But I'm sure it probably would have because it was right around that era. But yeah, Truth, Justice, and the American Way. It got turned to Truth, Justice, and the Human Way, which also really kind of ties in with the I guess, kind of theme of this movie in a way, just kind of referencing not how do you say concentrating on one era, but just or one population, I guess you can say, but rather just the human race as a whole, which I
Hmm.
think actually works on a lot of levels, to be honest, especially with the fact that he is an alien from another planet that came to this planet to claim the world, this new world, as his home, not necessarily just, Kansas or Smallville or anything like that. So I thought it worked really well. The third tagline that we have for this movie is "It begins." And this one I feel works really well. And I think it worked not just as a tagline for the film on its own singularly, but I think that it really worked on a grand scale when we're considering the DCU as a whole. Because
Hmm.
yes, it begins. It begins cinematically with Superman. Of course, it actually began with Creature Commandos, but nonetheless, the cinema portion of the DCU, this is what laid the foundation. And overall, I think that, spoiler alert, I think that it laid out a solid foundation to be able to build from. Wasn't what I was hoping for, but overall, I was pleased with how it came out. Just yeah, we'll get to the scoring a little bit later. But regarding the synopsis of this film, well, the synopsis, I'm going to go ahead and pretty much keep it brief because anybody that's seen this movie and knows a Superman film kind of knows what the general idea is. But Superman, a young reporter, or I guess I should say Clark Kent, a young reporter in Metropolis, struggles to reconcile his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing as he fights for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. In a nutshell, that's pretty much it. I mean, that wraps it up, really. I mean, I don't know. Do you have anything to add as far as a opinion on the synopsis there, Matthias?
I mean, even I feel like a synopsis for Superman is kind of not really important. I mean, everybody kind of knows who he is. Everybody kind of knows what he stands for. So, this film obviously it's supposed to harken into that whole aspect of his character and all stuff, and I think it does so in a really good way. But as we go further on, we'll definitely talk about the elements of how this Superman feels in comparison to some of the past there. But yeah, I think it's a good tag, a good like synopsis. I feel.
Yeah, that works. All right. Well, with the synopsis down, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the scene by scene breakdown portion of this show. And I'm going to go ahead and start by stating what is said at the beginning of this movie, which is the first thing that I'm going to say I wasn't a fan of. But I'm going to go ahead and read it out anyways, because that's how it was as it appeared on the movie. 3 centuries ago, the first superpowered beings, known as metahumans, appeared on Earth, ushering in a new era of gods and monsters. 3 decades ago, an extraterrestrial baby was sent in a spacecraft to Earth and adopted by Kansas farmers. 3 years ago, the baby, now grown, announced himself as Superman, the most powerful metahuman of all. 3 weeks ago, Superman stopped the country of Baravia from invading Jarhanpur, sparking controversy around the world. 3 hours ago, a metahuman named the Hammer of Baravia attacked Superman in the city of Metropolis. 3 minutes ago, Superman lost the battle for the first time. 3 seconds ago, I didn't like this intro at all. The 3 seconds ago was just thrown in there for good measure. I get what they were going for, and this is we're going to be talking about this as we discuss these scenes, folks. So that's the whole point of this scene by scene breakdown. I This didn't work for me, and to me, it kind of set off the whole movie in the wrong direction. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. This is gonna be unfiltered commentary by myself, a big DC fan. Yes, also a Zack Snyder fan, but this isn't about that. This isn't about a not my Superman type of complaint. I appreciate movies for what they are and judge them based on what I see, not what I have a preconceived notion about. And with this, it just put the movie in the wrong direction overall. And I'll explain a little bit, but I'm curious to hear what your opinion is on the matter. Matthias, did this bother you at all, or what opinion do you have on this type of approach?
I feel like this is probably going to be like the first, probably not the last, like movie film review thingy to where I think we're gonna have really different ideas about this film,
That's
and
fair.
I think both like good and a bad way. So we'll buckle up on this here, but in terms of like that sort of like opening title crawl, I think that works for me in a sense to where it does give you an understanding of that this isn't going to be a complete original origin story. That this is already going to be a world that has already dealt with metahumans, that's already dealt with, Superman already. And we're not going to get a whole spiel of like, okay, we're going to see him growing up as a kid and we're going to see him coming out of the pod and we're going to see him, deal with his powers at a young age. Like, it's going to skip all of that. And I think just for the focus of just getting the audience set up for, hey, this isn't the usual way we do things where, all those other films were always like origin stories and stuff like that, that this one is just going to get you right into the action and right into the now as you kind of see it with Superman. So I know they did multiple screenings, at least what James Gunn has said in interviews, that they've done one part of the film with that opening title, like title crawl thing, and one where they didn't. In the one that they didn't include that, it apparently was very hard for people to understand that this is a part of a different universe and this was not a continuation of anything that was previously shown in the DC universe.
Hmm.
So that little bit was just to kind of help people settle in into this is what James Gunn is doing with it. This is his version of Superman, and going forward, this is what we're going to be seeing and what we're going to be kind of playing with in the world, where superheroes and superhumans and all that stuff are a norm. It's not that they're an anomaly. It's like this is what people actually deal with, and people actually have to have this expectation of like dealing with this like in a tangible sense. So I think it works for me in that regard because I think it just gives a little bit more context that this is different from anything we've seen. But yeah, that's how I feel.
I mean, that's a good take on it. You're wrong. No, I'm kidding.
All right, well,
Yeah, I know. No, I'm kidding. I'm just making a joke. I Here's the thing, and I definitely understand the need for it, but I think where my criticism or my take on this, as far as not really appreciating it, is that because of that, they needed
hmm
to do. I'm not going to say a whole different movie, but take a whole different approach to the movie. My thing is, I know that people can say, okay, we don't really need a another origin story, like Spider-Man, or we don't need another origin story with how he became Spider-Man. I understand the need for that. That worked out pretty well the way that they introduced Tom Holland into the MCU. We don't really need another Batman origin story. I get that because yes, we've had a whole bunch of them. Superman, yes, we've had Christopher Reeve. Yes, we've had Henry Cavill. Um, and other versions of him television wise or series and everything like that with Smallville, and then there was a Superman series as well. So I get that. The series
hmm
have added to that, but cinematically there wasn't really much of an opportunity for the audience, I feel, to connect with this type of character and relate with him, which I think played out later on in the film when you see the public turn against him. I didn't really get that sense of we trusted him because it just felt like this movie started off in the second act and continued on instead of starting from the very beginning. I'm not saying you have to do a whole origin story of like have an entire film or half a film dedicated to it, but some sort of semblance to get the audience more connected. Kind of in the same way that series do. I mean, obviously a series is different because you have a whole bunch of time to work with it, but that
hmm
was also gonna bring my next attention was a movie isn't gonna be good or bad based on how long it is. Of course not. I understand that. But I definitely feel like this movie could have added some more time to it to add that type of an effect, to get that audience a little bit more to connect with some of these characters, because as we'll get into it a little bit later, that's my other take with this, is that I feel like this movie was a little too bloated with characters that you didn't really get a full connection with because of the short runtime. Or it was because you had too many characters in the short runtime. It's one or the other. And that was my take with it. That's kind of where I sit with it. But in any case, that was just the little scale or what do you call it? Little intro, I guess, for this movie. We haven't even gotten to the first scene, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into that before we run out of time on our own show. I don't know. Scene one opens with Superman crashing into the snow after losing his first battle with the Hammer of Baravia. Battered and bruised, he whistles for Krypto to come and take him home. The Fortress of Solitude opens up, and Superman is placed on an operating table to absorb the rays of the sun at an exponential rate. While this is going on, a message from his Kryptonian parents plays in the background. Superman's strength is restored, and he quickly heads back to the battle where Lex Luthor is introduced as the brain behind the Hammer's combat skills, controlling the movements by a set of controls and commands. Superman accepts that he lost the battle as the Hammer returns back to base. This goes right with what I was saying in terms of jumping right into the action. Because immediately following this, it's almost like we're introduced in the first launch of this movie, and it's like we're taken into something that would have been the beginning of Superman Part 2. I feel like. I feel like the way this movie started off, this would have been the intro for a Superman Part 2, where you already know the characters, you've established this, but you can jump right into a battle with, Hammer of Baravia, and you can understand what's going on. To start the movie off here, I felt like I said before, started the movie off from the second act instead in a way that before instead of the first. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. What was your take on this intro scene?
I think overall for this, I do like that it starts it off in the action there. I know for a lot of people, one of the main criticisms about this film in particular was that it feels like there is an entire first act that has been cut out to where there should have been like a montage set up of like Superman kind of gaining the trust of the public, all of his other sort of like exploits and all that stuff that sort of really set him up, where he is today or where he is, today in terms of like the timeline of the film. But I think setting up the sense of him having that fight, and which I think, beautifully shot, really well made in that regard as well too. But I
Mhm.
do like that the movie is going at a pace to where it's like you guys kind of already have an understanding of what Superman is for the most part. That
Mhm.
it's cutting out all of that sense of like heavy lifting in terms of trying to sort of set his character up in the framework of James Gunn's universe. And I appreciate that James Gunn did take a little bit of a risk with doing this and just kind of starting up the action and not kind of like bloating us with an origin story or with like an initial sort of showing of Superman. I think it works for me. I like that it starts out with this fight. I like that the setup is kind of more focused on everything else that's going to go on with the rest of the film, which we'll go of course go through it. But I think having it to where okay, you have your Superman, you have your antagonist here. It's perceived to be the Hammer of Baravia, but obviously it's Lex Luthor. Uh, I think it works a little bit better there, and just kind of just getting like boom, just starting from there. But yeah, I like it so far. Like this movie still got me within those first like 10 to 15 minutes here.
For sure. The other thing to go about it is it works on the level of it definitely just plugs you right back into the action. You could also look at it from that perspective. Like, all right,
Mhm.
bam, we're gonna, the wheels come off and here, or the training wheels come off, and this is the real deal, type of situation. Especially by starting off the movie with technically, with Superman crash landing to after losing his first battle, so to speak, or what we are understanding. But again, that also comes back with the impact of having the audience after having seen him win every battle, seeing a text that says he lost his first battle takes, actions speak louder than words. I think that's a
Mm,
good way of looking at it. And for me, reading he lost his first battle versus actually seeing that he lost his first battle because I have previous battles to compare it to that I remember as a viewer kind of robbed me of that emotional connection to this character or this version of the character. So that was my main takeaway on that. But beyond that, I mean, the action is great. The scenes are the cinematography is great. Special effects, everything else. I mean, is fantastic. It's just I feel it's that the the stuff that isn't on screen, I guess, so to speak, that was missing in a way for me as far as the ability to make that connection. But that's just
Mm.
that. So the scene 2 opens up with Clark Kent making his way into the Daily Planet, where he is being criticized as well as cheered for having his first story on the front page. We also see that Jimmy Olsen is apparently a ladies' man. I don't know where they're going with that, but they chose to make that a thing. I have a prediction. I think that it's gonna be related to something else that he either a wish that he made, a power that he has, a something behind the scenes, an artifact that he possesses. If I had to guess, something along those lines, because there is talks about doing some sort of a Jimmy Olsen spin-off series from this. I haven't heard too many more development regarding that, but that said, I feel like how do you do that? By incorporating and giving his character something a little more that meets the eye. Um, Not a transformer, but I think that that's going to be something that they introduce to make his character a little bit more interesting,
Hmm.
and probably explain why he's quite the ladies' man apparently. But anyway, we are then taken to a government facility where Lex Luthor streams footage of his collection of artificial metahumans called Planet Watch for the Department of Defense officials to utilize in an effort to take down Superman in retaliation for interfering with the United States ally known as Baravia. That said, with no solid proof of malicious intent, the government wants nothing to do with Lex Luthor's plan to go against Superman. They definitely set it up pretty quick. The idea of what is being put in place and what the premise of this film is going to be about. But again, it's something that a lot of people probably knew going into it. Okay, there's Superman, there's Lex Luthor. They're not best friends, they're enemies. Here we go. Although it could be said, Smallville did the slow burn, and they did actually start off as friends, which eventually, when you got to that point where they weren't friends, again, made it that much more impactful. I don't know. What do you think of scene 2, Matthias? Anything to add regarding that part?
I mean, one thing that I liked a lot about Superman here is that besides like all the action sequences and where you see David Cornswet as Superman, I do feel like his seeing him play around as Clark Kent as well too just kind of does set up that sort of different dynamic that is always present, in every iteration of Superman, where it's like, yeah, you have the charismatic, all powerful Superman, and then you have the sort of meek and kind of nerdy Clark Kent. And I think, David does a really good job in sort of presenting those two elements. And I think getting to see like the sort of relationship that he has with everybody at the Daily Planet was also really interesting as well too. I wish they leaned more into that throughout the film.
Mm,
I would have been nice to kind of see him work in that environment a bit more and just kind of seeing how those relationships, you know, not just like with obviously with Jimmy Olsen and with Lois obviously, but with everybody else also on the staff too. I would have liked to see more interaction with that. And then with Lex Luthor, that's you already have an understanding that his sense of wanting to best Superman in any way that he can, is just basically that's his reason for living here. Um, but no, I think Nicholas Hoult does a really good job in sort of channeling a lot of that sort of like Gene Hackman esque portrayal of Lex Luthor here. I think he's honestly like one of my top sort of portrayals of Lex Luthor like in media when it comes to Superman. So I think he does an excellent job here so far, and he does an even better job later on.
yeah, I think that's a safe way to put it. I agree with you with the that we get introduced to the Daily Planet crew there, and I would have liked to see a little bit more, like you, with that type of development. Again, maybe something that could have been added to the film just to give a little bit more of uh, a character development type of deal. We got glimpses of characters, including Perry. Is it Perry White? I want to say Perry White,
Yeah,
right?
Perry White. Yeah,
Okay. We got introduced to him a little bit. I didn't not like his portrayal, but I feel like it was just a little too, how I hate to use a term, but like comic bookish. Um, the
comic
got
bookish in a comic book movie? No.
well, I mean, look, there's a Logan, as well
Yeah,
as, as
yeah.
as a form that takes on a different version, or the Snyderverse. But yeah, I I think what it was just maybe a little too playful because I don't know, well, not playful, the idea of, just the trope of the chief and, editor
Mhm.
holding a big cigar and saying, "I like your moxie, kid," type of
Y-
deal. We
Yeah,
kind of
very.
already got that with Spider-Man, you
Yeah,
know?
true, true. Yeah.
And that worked really well. That is an example of an idea that worked and didn't really feel and kinda take the movie and dip it in a different direction, and versus something like this where it didn't ruin the film, obviously, but I don't know, I wanted something a little more grounded differently. I don't know. To not play the character in that way. But it works for the world that they're building, so I get why they did it. It's just something that didn't really work for me. Again, didn't ruin the film. Um Overall, we get, like I said, a few glimpses of the different characters, throughout sprinkled in throughout this movie, but I do feel I agree with you that a little more of them working, together would
Mhm.
have probably helped this movie to relate a little bit better and reach the audiences, more. Again, I say that, and that I shouldn't say audiences, me specifically, 'cause I can't speak for everyone because apparently, I mean, it did fairly well. Scene three begins with an interview in which Lois Lane finally gets to interview Superman, questioning his involvement in stopping Baravia from invading Jarhanpur. Was it good? Was it ethical? Things heat up, not in a good way, and Lois ends the argument stating that she warned Clark that she was not good at relationships. Meanwhile, at the Fortress of Solitude, Lex enters with his team in an effort to find evidence needed to turn the US against Superman and unleashes the perfect distraction in the meantime while he's doing all of this with a kaiju looking type of creature that wreaks havoc on the city of Metropolis. During this time, the engineer repairs the damaged message, as there was a damaged message, I should say, from Kal-El's parents to him, and it is broadcasted by news outlets that apparently it was his parents' wish for Superman essentially to rule Earth with an iron fist. There's a lot that happened in this scene, and I'm collectively putting these scenes together because it's really like maybe 2 or 3 scenes as one that I'm mentioning here for the sake of time for the show, but there's a lot that happens here, and we're gonna go ahead and jump first into the interview that Lois Lane finally gets with Superman as he now, I'm not gonna say reluctantly, he volunteers for it, but I think in a way he bit off more than he could chew because, I don't know, either he forgot how good of a reporter Lois Lane is, or he just thought that she was gonna maybe throw him some softball questions or something to
Mhm.
kinda a fluff piece, so to speak, um, for this article. I did like this article though, or I did like this interview. I thought it worked really well, and from what I recall, and this is just from memory, I didn't confirm this as far as, like, with actual statistics or facts, but I know it is a fact, but they were back and forth with keeping this in there and letting it run as long as it did. I think they had toyed around with the idea of shortening it, but at the end of the day, James Gunn decided to keep this to run as long as it did because it worked for the film. It helped to create that tension and just further develop these characters a little bit more. I liked the interview. I liked the fact that you could see the frustration that he was having in 2 different types of characters. He was having the frustration with her as Clark, but he was also having the frustration with her as Superman, who's just a guy trying to do the right thing. And in a sense, almost getting punished for it is how it kind of was perceived. But in reality, it's just Lois kind of doing her job as a good reporter. So I thought overall this scene worked really well for the film. But what's your opinion on it, Matthias?
Yeah, I mean, for this one, I think this. I'm glad that they kept this scene as long as it is because it really just shows the sort of characterization that James Gunn has in mind, not just for Superman Clark Kent, but also just for Lois Lane as well, just as a character, to where like yeah, she is an adamant professional and stuff like that, and she is very much about getting to the truth of things and in sort of getting a real answer from somebody and trying to kind of let them see that everything that they've done or that they're attempting to do isn't always going to be seen in the same light as, whoever the protagonist or whoever she's interviewed is going to see it as. And that's kind of what you see, especially with the dynamic here between them and with Superman's characters to where he doesn't understand and he's frustrated that she is criticizing what he thinks is just the right thing to do when in the context of like the world that they live in, like yeah, maybe his the stuff that he does means well and it is perceived as good or feels that it's the right thing to do, but that's just not how things work in the real world. Unfortunately, there is protocols, there's rules, there's
Hmm.
everything else to sort of juggle with, but he doesn't understand that because obviously his whole method of thinking is just dictated by yeah, just do the right thing and be good. Whereas with her being a human and all that stuff is that you can be good, but you also have to understand that the world is much more complicated than that. It's not as black and white as Clark wants to see it as, and the frustration and the sort of infallibility that he has with this definitely humanizes his character more. And I really love that they kind of do that to where you see that he isn't just kind of like the person to have all the answers and just like perfect in every way. Like, no, he has a lot of issues in terms of his perception of, good versus evil, but also as, Lois kind of also makes fun of him about his perception of others' perceptions of him too, with the whole, like, oh yeah, online they're calling you super shit and all that stuff, which, it's really good. But you just see that he feels and he has these anxieties and these fears in the same way that, any other human would have. And I think I appreciate that this film takes the time to kind of showcase that.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that too, because with that one, with that name that he goes through, he was just like, "Oh, come on, Lois, that one
Yeah.
specifically
Mhm.
bothers me." And it's funny because she knew exactly what buttons to push, and that's where I know she was talking about, the ethical position of that, but also her interviewing him in a way is an ethical question in and on itself because she knew what question or what name or whatever uh, would push his buttons. So I don't know. I kind of thought that again. This has nothing to do, or I should mention, this has nothing to do with my perception of the movie. I just was. It was something I thought of as I was watching this movie. I was like, well, is her kind of knowing him intimately also, does that kind of breach the idea of her? Should she even be interviewing him at all?
Mhm.
Honestly, I don't know. And you know what? Okay, here's one question. So we've established that she's a great reporter. We during this collection of scenes that I've put together here, um, I mentioned that we get that little kaiju looking creature that grows eventually and just like wreaks havoc on the city of Metropolis, which is really cool. I liked the design of the creature overall. Um, we get introduced to the Justice Gang, which is Guy Gardner. We've got Mr. Terrific, and we get a Hawk Girl as well there. Um, it's a nice introduction for them overall. I didn't really immediately connect with them. I didn't really look at them as characters that I feel that I don't know, like really wanted me to be like, "Oh, that's cool. It's really cool to see them." It was just kind of like, "All right, I guess they're there." And by the end of the movie, I didn't really feel any more like, "Wow, I want to see more of them," or "I hope that they're in the next movie." That again, character development. I feel that they had too many subplots and characters in this to be able to move forward with. Maybe they should have just limited it to Mr. Terrific and just kept him as the main person in this type of deal. Maybe not put a three in there and just keep it as one. And maybe you could have devoted more time to that character as singularly rather than try to put together three, I guess, and tie it together. Didn't
Mm.
ruin the film, but I feel like another treatment of it would have helped. I did appreciate their conversations and things like that overall. That said, I don't want to give the wrong impression on that, but here's the reason I bring them up is not only were they introduced in this battle as they're fighting in Metropolis against this giant creature, Superman is there as well. Who's covering this story? Because Lois is back at the Daily Planet talking with, I think, Cat Grant about dating or something like that. She's looking at the screen and all of that, but wouldn't you wanna be there covering this story, as a star reporter and everything? I that was just my takeaway. I don't know. What do you think about that, Theus?
I mean, I get it. I think my biggest issue with having the Justice Gang also in this film is which I appreciate, and I glad there's a little bit of that juxtaposition between someone like Superman who was so concerned about, you know, limiting the destruction of the city, as well as not wanting to just to outright, just destroy this kaiju. I
Mhm.
think it's good to kind of set up how, like, yeah, they very much are acting in the role of like just mercenaries where, like, yeah, they're powerful, but they're powerful and helpful for, you know, for the money, for the fame, for that prestige essentially there. Whereas
Mm.
him, he's just totally concerned about like, everybody else's well being. And also for this kaiju as well, too. He just wants to put him in a
True.
zoo. I mean, that was his plan. So I like that it sets up how even when talking about metahumans and then someone like Superman, that even there's conflict, just beyond even how different he is from a human, but how different he is from these other super powerful beings in this same universe. So I appreciate that, but I feel in the instances that they are in this film, there's a lot to sort of be left on the table in terms of how they're characterized and like what are their what other parts of the story do they fit in and like what's their background. Like you could have done that in the film, you could have certainly made it a little bit longer to have that dialogue, but I feel then we're running into an issue of there just being too much of this film and too much
Mm.
spinning plates, so to speak, here. And in terms of like who's covering the story, like yeah, I would feel Lois yeah would want to cover this pretty cool story about what's happening there. But yeah, I don't know, that's kind of a funny thing you brought up. That's so funny.
I hadn't really
um
thought about it until the second watch, and I was like, "Why why isn't she there covering this story?
yeah.
Who's there covering this story at
Well
all?"
well, funny enough, you see him in one of like the big sort of billboard screens there, but Will Reeves, the youngest son of Christopher Reeves, actually he's one of the reporters that is covering the whole like kaiju story or whatever, like the footage there. You see him there's a correspondent who I didn't know this until I looked it up. He actually does work as a real life reporter for ABC. So I had no
Oh.
idea.
No, I didn't know. I knew that he, did make an appearance in the film. I mean, I guess that answers that question as far as him being a correspondent there. And again, it's just an observation that I made. It's not like, "And what about this?" type of thing, you know?
Totally
Um,
unwatchable.
yeah, that's it. This is trash. I'm turning it off altogether. It was just one of those things. I was like, she's like the star of this, ace reporter. Why wouldn't she be there? But at the same time, as was mentioned in the beginning of the film with the text and everything that was there, with the opening scroll, this has been going on. I guess we've existed in a world of metahumans already. Superman's only been around for I think announced to the world for 3 years, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we've had only 3 years of this. So maybe they have regular people that cover these stories as they happen, whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. But either way, it's a life threatening, crazy story. Again, I would just think that regardless of what correspondent is covering, you'd want to be there if you're like the impression that we've gotten from a Lois Lane in the past. Again,
Hmm.
just a small little thing that I noticed, but I did kind of think too, because in the scene is also where we get the announcement that while Lex Luthor broke into the Fortress of Solitude and the engineer um, did that entrapment type of thing to crypto, which I'm not gonna lie, man, that broke my heart when I saw that.
Hmm.
I was, the dog. There's the dog just trying to defend his the homestead and then when he got that, he's just like reaching at his mouth. I was like, oh, that broke my heart. I was like, oh, this poor little creature. I was like, I hope this person burns in hell. But it's or this is gonna John Wick the universe. Um, with them having uncovered the rest of the message that was apparently damaged in transit from Kal-El's parents, and then basically uncovering it and broadcasting it to the world, the translation and everything. It I understood it as a plot device, but it just seemed a little, I don't know, like a little too convenient of a plot thing to put in there. It's like, oh, this was damaged, you know. Now we're gonna undamage it, and here's the thing, and now this is the plot device that has the world turn on him. Again, it's just one of those things where we didn't get the connection to really see what Superman visually, ourselves as the audience, has done for humanity. I feel like that would have taken it a little bit further, but if you combine that with this kind of convenient plot device that it just so happens to be that this, video was damaged and now it's here and I don't know, even with all of the robots, I mean, I guess they're just there to serve them. I just feel like by now that video could have been translated by now. I don't know. Like, I guess it took an expert hacker to do it in her case, which made sense for her character, um, as far as her being able to repair it. But I don't know. It just seemed it didn't really work for me as overall to really convince me of that. And then you combine that with the idea of not really connecting everything that Superman has done up to this point, and then really feeling the full effect of when the public turned against him. It just kind of felt like they were bandwagon fans that were just all of a sudden his fans, and then turned on him, and then of course later on jumped right back on again. I don't know. What
Mm.
do you think about that, Matthias?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that sort of does take me out with it, it's like I do feel that whole sort of twist is a little ham-fisted in its delivery, I feel. But I know James Gunn was taking a lot of inspiration from two different comic runs. He was taking inspiration from All-Star Superman and Superman Birthright, where in the case of Superman Birthright, that's a little bit more of an overt kind of not a different origin story to Superman, but essentially with Birthright, that was one of the focuses of that story of like, even though Superman was brought to Earth to essentially be a ruler, to essentially lead mankind and stuff like that, because that's just how the Kryptonian race was. They were very much sort of like a conqueror type race. I do like how, and there's really a payoff a little bit later in the film, that even with the knowledge of that, or in the case of Birthright, even with the knowledge of that, Superman still maintains his humanity, his sense of goodwill, and his sense of protecting, the most, unprotected people on Earth and stuff like that, and the most, the weakest of them, instead of just kind of outright designed to be a ruler. So I like that they're harkening back to that sort of format there. But yeah, for me, like, yeah, it is a little convenient. The whole like, oh well, she has those powers to hack things, with the nanites or whatever that she has, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, she figured it out. Who this alien space technology that has been most likely untouched by any other humans, besides the super robots and Superman, but she manages to crack it, like in minutes. So yeah, a little bit, again, it's just a suspension of of all that. But I do like the element though of like that does tap into the fears people would have of like, yeah, anybody who has to interact with somebody from outer space and all stuff, there always would be those fears of like, what are their intentions, and are they just essentially just pulling an act on us and then just waiting for us to be at our most relaxed, and then there it goes. So it plays into that well. It's a little ham-fisted.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too is you could be like, okay, I asked the question earlier, why didn't Superman or Clark or Kal-El ever think to get that message fixed? Because it is
Yeah.
known that it's damaged. Like they make the effort of explaining that, which is another thing we're going to talk about later when we give this rating in terms of dialogue. They do explain as far as the context of that this message is damaged, and whatnot. So you would think that Clark would want to uncover any bit of clue or evidence as far as his parents or any type of ties to his lineage of to his home planet of Krypton that was
Mhm.
destroyed. If you find out that there's damage to this, I would imagine you would go to anywhere or anybody that you could find, especially as Superman, to have it translated or fixed, or well, not translated, but fixed or something. Um, or those androids as well, if they could fix it. And if they can't, here's another thing. Mr. Terrific confirms and says, like, I know the people that confirmed all the well, I get, yeah, the fact that the uh video itself wasn't tampered with or edited or anything like that. He goes like, these guys know what they're doing. So why didn't he ever go to anybody like that to have it
Mhm.
fixed? I'm just saying, if I was trying to uncover something, so that's the things that led to me to believe. I was like, this is a little too convenient for me in terms of a story plot to move this forward. Um, maybe something else could have been used. I mean, I don't know, but that's just my take on that. But we're going to go ahead and move on. Scene 4 begins with Superman rushing back to the Fortress of Solitude, where he finds that Crypto has been taken and his fortress has been destroyed. He looks for solace at his apartment where Lois is there with a hot beverage. In the background, the Justice Gang is fighting some kind of mythological imp, while Superman discusses punk rock with Lois. It is there that he decides to turn himself into the DOJ on the off chance that he will be taken to the same place where they are more than likely holding crypto. That said, it is then revealed that he is taken to a pocket universe prison created by Lex. Jimmy Olsen's source discloses this information, and Lois is on the trail. Also, Metamorpho is introduced during this time frame as well. So, kind of picks up with the conversation that we just left off in terms of Mr. Terrific confirms, like, I know those experts. This wasn't tampered with. It's legit. It's the real deal. Then the next question, I think, from Hot Girl is, well, where did they get the footage? And then that's when he puts two and two together and is like, okay, this is in my Fortress of Solitude. How did they get this? And he immediately goes back and then finds his fortress basically destroyed, and Crypto's, of course, missing. And this does lead into the scene that was pretty funny, which is kind of, you get a sense, an idea of the world that they've built in a way, because Lois is looking at Superman drinking his hot beverage, tea, I'm going to assume, to soothe the soul. And in the background, you see that giant battle that's going on. And she's kind of looking like, aren't aren't you gonna cover this? Aren't you gonna go take care of this or anything like that? And nonchalant, he's just like, nah, they've got it. Man, this is really good, type of deal
Mhm.
with that drink that he was drinking. And that was funny. Like, I admit that was funny. But it's funny. What's even funnier is that she's looking at him like, aren't you gonna go take care of this? And I could have said the same thing about you, Lois. Aren't you gonna take care or cover this kaiju, take over in Metropolis? But with that, we get that idea during the scene as well, where his humanity is coming out in terms of doing the right thing, in terms of turning himself into the Department of Justice, uh, on the off chance that they'll take him to where Crypto is, because he's basically saying that he's alone and he doesn't have anybody else and he's probably scared. And just like that got me. The part where they're really going above and beyond for Crypto really like hit home with me, because I'm a dog owner. I love my dog. So seeing that really added to my appreciation of this version of Superman. I will say, but I don't know what's your opinion on this, Matthias?
Yeah, I mean, all the attempts, that they have to humanize them and all that stuff. I mean, all of them fall really, really well and stuff. And they land really well in terms of the way that we sort of perceive things and the way that we kind of hold dear even very small and probably unimportant things that we have in our lives. Not to say that owning a dog is unimportant. I mean, I have two of them. I mean, I love them to death and I would do anything for them. But him talking about that, about how, like, yeah, Crypto's alone and probably scared and stuff like that, and him sacrificing himself even for, Crypto, as crazy of a dog he is. It's just another element of his character to where, like, I love this characterization of Superman and sort of willing to sacrifice it all for the smallest of things and for the littlest things, even if it could mean, the end of him. The whole sort of thing that he says, it's like, maybe, caring about people, maybe that's the real punk rock. Like, that's a
Hmm.
through line in this entire film that sort of really puts like the stamp on it, and like what the whole point of this film is, and just how James Gunn sees Superman. And it's one of those things that really I enjoy a lot, and I love the characterization of it. Honestly, one of my favorite ones, really. Um, but it's a good scene, again, establishing himself, as just another humanistic side of him, and also him saying, "I love you, Lois," as well too. That's another big thing as well too, is that you see that relationship also blossom to where it's not just about him; it's also about how he feels about her and the real true feelings that kind of are blossoming from that. Uh, but I like it. It's a good scene so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And we do get introduced to Metamorpho, because we mentioned that the prison that he's being held at is a prison created by Lex, which is a pocket universe. Able to He's got a facility there to be able to hold metahumans, as well as people that he just doesn't like because they did some sort of a blog against him. Lex Luthor, as we find out, one of his ex-girlfriends, I guess, is being held captive there as well. we also get introduced to Metamorpho, which is comes in handy and is the what Lex was alluding to in his previous meeting with the Department of Justice, where they were saying like, "Yeah, doesn't kryptonite do that?" And I thought that was like out, we were out of it basically or something. So that's also something that should be carried forward is for this universe is in this world there apparently it aren't any traces left or anything like that of kryptonite. That said, because Metamorpho can transform or there's a word for it, but anyways, I'm just gonna say transform into any elements or things like that that I guess not just of this planet, but I guess anything that he can, if he knows that it exists, I don't know. He can turn into which he was able to transform his hand into kryptonite rock, which was able to suppress Superman's powers, obviously, and enabled him to hold him captive there. Which really did make me wonder. I wonder what the ultimate plan was because I mean, are they gonna have to like go to the restroom together? Like what happens when, at one point or another, Superman's gonna have to get away. Let's just say they were really there for an extended period of time. I mean, he's just gonna follow him, like, or something like with his hand. I don't know. Anyways, obviously it was a short term plan in terms of that. And also, I would imagine at one point or another, Lex probably wasn't gonna keep Superman as a prisoner for very long. He probably had ideas of finding a way to kill him sooner than later, but in any case, that was just something that I thought of randomly right now. I was like, you know what? What was the end game in this? How was this going to work out? But anyways, uh, Metamorpho. I like the actor that played the character. I wasn't crazy about the character, but it worked for the movie. I don't know. What's your opinion on that one, Matthias?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Anthony Kerrigan and stuff like that. He's been in a lot of great things. He's been in Barry. He played Calypso in the Twisted Metal TV series as well too. And then seeing him here was also quite the delight. And shout out to him for staying in 5 to 6 hours of makeup and all that stuff there to apply all that stuff, which I appreciate a lot of the sort of methods that this film goes through in terms of sort of making like tangible sets and tangible makeup. Because yeah, he looked really good as Metamorpho and having all those different kind of applications of materials and elements and all that. It's like, okay, like just from looking at him, it's like I get a sense as to what he's able to do and what he's able to accomplish. But and I think it was pretty cool to have him set up as like, oh yeah, it's like how are they going to have it to where they're able to defeat Superman or at least suppress him? And it's like, oh well, here's a guy who can turn himself into kryptonite if he wanted to, and thus begins that. But I liked him as a character. As far as would I want to see him in other projects and all that stuff, it just kind of depends on like how he fits into like the whole sense of the universe there. So, but I think he was a good addition essentially for especially for those who probably know of him from like the comic books and stuff like that. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, cool, it's that guy."
Hmm. I liked him. His favorite or my favorite role with him would have to be as, and I can't remember the name, and I said it's my favorite, but he came out in the series Gotham, and he was a hitman in that series, and he just nailed that role. Like he just like I don't know, he embodied that role. That was the first thing that I ever noticed him in, and he just I don't know that character clicked for him. And then, of course, in Barry as well, where he just loved his character. He just has comedic timing, but he can also be a villain, which worked. And I think because of that, maybe I want to see him. Maybe I wanted to see him in this universe more so as a villain than a hero. This worked for him. It was nice. I just feel like I don't know. If y'all ever get a chance to see him in or Matthias, if you ever get a chance to see him as the character in Gotham, just look up Gotham and I guess Anthony Kerrigan, and you'll see what he played. I just cannot remember the name of the character, but
Didn't he play as wasn't it Victor Zaz?
yes, that's the
Yeah.
name. Okay, yes, yes. I could not remember that, but yes, very very good. I just worked out well. He was one of the reasons I like that show, that series, which was a good series. I appreciated that one for its run. But yeah, so I like that he's in this world, in this universe. I wouldn't mind seeing him, in the next movies, to see what comes up. Maybe he'll come out as something else. I mean, obviously, it ends with him as part of the Justice Gang, uh, which works. So we'll see. But let's jump right in. Let's go ahead and move it right along here. And that's gonna bring us to Scene 6 reveals that Jimmy Olsen's source, Eve, has turned on Lex and sent Jimmy the evidence he needs to finally expose him. Immediately afterward, we cut to Superman on the Kent farm in Kansas, where actually, you know what? Sorry, I skipped a scene there. Let me go ahead and jump back up. Wait, this isn't adding up. So yeah, I said Lois is on the trail. Metamorpho is introduced. Okay, Lois is on the trail of looking for Superman and engages the Justice Gang for help. They pass on it, but Mister Terrific decides to help and comically opens up his garage door that moves slow as hell, which was a nice element added there. I thought. They get in his flying Jetsons mobile looking thing basically and are off to save Superman. They track the last traces of his presence at some beach looking location, and Mr. Terrific shows what he can do single handedly by taking out the guards with the help of his T spheres. Within this pocket universe, Metamorpho decides to help Superman after witnessing the death of an innocent man at the hands of Luthor. With the help of Mr. Terrific and Lois, they break out and escape just before the pocket universe closes behind them. There's a lot of cool stuff that happens in this little collection of scenes here. First and foremost, Lois engaging the Justice Gang for help was a good scene between her and Guy Gardner when she mentions the haircut, and you have Nathan Fillion or just basically confirming everything that of who Superman is because he is they are of the cloth as he put it. That whole exchange worked for me. In terms of character development and the Justice Gang, I feel like that interaction worked the best for me. I don't know, it just did, it clicked. Everything else was okay, but that specific the interactions between her and Guy Gardner, I bought that. The dialogue was just really well, the whole communication just was on point. It just clicked for the film. Um what else did we have here? Metamorpho deciding to well, not turn actually, because it's not like his allegiance was ever to Lex Luthor. He was only helping because they were holding his son hostage, as we find out as well during these scenes. Basically, do as I say type of deal, or we're going to hurt your son. So naturally, he did what any parent would do, and he looked after his family. But after witnessing Lex Luthor shoot a man in front of both of him and Superman because Superman wasn't willing to give the location um, of where he was originally from. I believe that was a question. I might be remembering it wrong. Lex Luthor is basically kind of doing a whole Russian roulette type of thing, just spinning the gun and firing. Um, and unfortunately, I think in the second attempt, kills the person that they were holding kind of as a not hostage, but as his leverage to get the information that he needed from Superman. And I had mixed feelings about this because two things with Lex, I feel like Nicholas Holt's portrayal was going back and forth with he was kind of in that comic book sense type of world, but then it got a little real when he pulled the trigger and actually just killed somebody. I didn't see that coming, honestly. I don't
Mhm.
know what I imagine also could have happened, but you've got Lex who's doing these pretty evil things. I mean, just killing a person point blank range for no reason, really, but also kind of in still taking place in this comic book world type of appeal. And I don't know, I kind of didn't work for me in a way. I don't know. What about you, Matthias? What was your opinion on something like that?
Yeah, I think the whole sequence of Lex having Superman pretty much, stuck in the prison in the pocket universe and stuff like that. I like how as you're kind of going through it, as he's being ferried there into the holding cells, I like all those elements of like Lex kind of explaining his plan and kind of not just explain like what the pocket universe is, but sort of the intent of it. He has it to where he has this his monkeys there, you know, typing online, farming outrage and then explaining how not only does he hold like political prisoners from other countries, but also people that have just wronged him because of a blog post and all that stuff. Like you get such an understanding of his character of like, yes, he's powerful and he, average obviously has a lot of pull with other organizations and other nations as well too. But deep down in him, he's just an evil, bitter guy, you know? Like him just kind of going through it and, finding, the falafel vendor, Ali, which, no, which actually helped Superman in like the first fight,
Hmm.
going through to the lengths of finding the guy and then bring him there just to get Superman to talk. It's like that takes a lot of thought and a lot of evil thought to go like to do something like that. And it just again sets up that yeah, it's like this version of Lex, like yeah, there's elements of him that are very super comic booky and all that stuff, like very kind of harkening back to the action comic days of villains, but he's also plays a bastard really, really, really well. And I appreciate that there's those two kind of conflicting elements in this movie. Um, but I like it. I think for me it worked, because I was like, okay, yeah, we're in a comic movie, but they're taking elements here where that are very serious. Like, yeah, just outright killing Ali, and after doing two spins of the cylinder of the revolver, it's like, damn, it's like I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought something was going to go wrong, like the revolver was going to jam, or Superman was somehow going to get out, or something like that. But no, that just didn't happen. It just kind of set the tone of like, okay, there's a little bit of like grittiness and sort of like a little bit more grounded elements in this, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely put real life stakes, on the matter, which typically does help the movie. But I don't know, I was just mixed about it because it worked, I guess, for the mechanics of what they were doing to move this story along. But again, this is a guy who has monkeys typing, on the web. And so we have a movie that has monkeys typing on the web, and spreading all this social media hate and all this stuff. And they're the bots essentially. Uh, and then you also have the same movie where the bad guy just point blank shoots a guy. And I don't know, I feel like those elements didn't necessarily mesh well. I understand why it was done. It definitely set a tone. But the other character that also was a little too cartoonish, I guess, was I don't know, what chancellor, or I'm not sure what his title was, or I guess president of Moravia or so.
Hmm.
Um, his portrayal was just, I don't know, it was a little much for me. I just didn't really it didn't work for me overall. That's all I'm gonna say. I definitely was not a fan of his character. I think if there's two characters that I had to say in this movie that just didn't work for me, he would be one of them. The other is the engineer. The engineer just didn't work for me. I don't know. I think that they could have, I'm not going to say casted someone else, maybe wrote her lines a little better, something. I don't know. I just didn't really, her performance didn't work for me. Maybe as an actress, maybe this just isn't the role for her. My opinion again. Um but yeah, I don't know, anything to say, any feedback on those comments?
Yeah, I think with yeah, President Luchek, the president of Moravia, yeah, it was a little kind of hokey with his portrayal and stuff like that. You just kind of got a sense that okay, this is just like the classic, uh dictator president guy, that's just hasn't gotten his comeuppance at all. So he's kind of goofy. So I'll give you that one. As far as the engineer, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that one just yet. I think, well, I know the portrayal in the comics is very different, but as far as like her, I think she was okay, but I think it wasn't. She didn't really do too much. Like aside from being the person that found out about the full footage of the message Superman's parents left and all that stuff. Outside of the film, she really doesn't have any other like jobs or kind of like activism, I guess is the thing with that. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's one of those ones where there's a little too many spinning plates, and I think she's one of the spinning plates there.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It just performance wise, maybe the lines that they gave her, whatever it was, it just didn't work for me. But it didn't ruin the film, but definitely didn't add to it for me. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move along to scene 6, which is the scene that I jumped ahead to earlier. So my apologies for that. Scene 6 reveals that Jimmy Olsen's source, Eve, has turned on Lex and sent Jimmy the evidence that he needs to finally expose him. Immediately afterward, we cut to Superman on the Kent farm in Kansas. This is after they've escaped the Pocket Universe, where Lois gets a really good glimpse of Clark's grounded humanity. The peaceful moment doesn't last long, however, as desperate to draw Superman out, Lex reopens the sealed pocket universe, ripping open a dimensional breach that threatens global catastrophe unless Superman intervenes. At the same time, Baravia is also preparing to invade Jarnpur again. Now aware of both threats, how can Superman be at two places at once? This is the scene that worked really well for me, though. This one was one of the best scenes I thought, and it was done with no lines, actually. And it was seeing how much his family cared for him, Ma and Pa Kent. And yeah, I mean, of course, they, were asking questions. Is he okay? All of his stuff. They lay him down in his room from his home in Kansas, and she's looking around his room and just seeing. I think she did a really good job of portraying that she knew all of this. She knew he grew up on Earth. She knew he had a home somewhere else and everything like that. But seeing it, gave her she took it all in. And she was like, okay, he really is human. Not saying she didn't think that or what before, or not human, but he's just like us, I guess. And I feel like she communicated a lot of that by just looking around his room and seeing the posters that he had, and just seeing that he had the same type of childhood for the most part, maybe as her or any other person on Earth may have had. But I don't know. That's my take on that. What about you, Matthias?
No, yeah, she gets a sense of like seeing everything in his room there to where it's like, oh, this isn't just an act. Like this is him. This
Yeah,
is like what he stands for. This is what he's about. And in the scene afterward, when he wakes up and all that, and then he gets to talk with his with Paul Kent and all that stuff as well too. It's like I love that whole element as well too, to where even though he feels like he's failed and he feels like he's kind of succumbing to what everybody has been telling him about how he's a danger, he's a menace and all that stuff because of what that whole message actually entailed of him being sent to conquer Earth, but for his dad to kind of bring him back you know into what was really important, to where like it's really about you and how you want to sort of how do you want to utilize your power and all that stuff, and how important it is for you as an individual to just make that decision and all that stuff. Like no one else can do it. And that scene got me because it's that whole thing of like your parents are always there to always talk you down from the ledge. It's like you can feel terrible about what you did or what you said to someone else, or like, hey, maybe you didn't win this game or whatever, and then there's always that element of like, hey, they're there to ground you to the real world. And that was a scene that I felt like, okay, this definitely captures the spirit of what's like super important in the film. So yeah, that's how I think overall I feel about just having that element of him going back home and just kind of seeing him in his element, and Lois also seeing him in his element. I think that again sets up another sort of facet of his personality of like, yeah, he's the real deal. He's just a regular normal kid.
yeah. I think overall that definitely is a part where it grounded him there, or that she got that impression. But all right, scene 7 is going to be at the Daily Planet. Lois uncovers that Lex orchestrated everything to seize half of Baravia. Superman races to Metropolis to stop the dimensional rift, but is confronted by the engineer and Ultraman, who is under Lex's control. The engineer's nanites nearly suffocate him, but Superman escapes by flying into space and crashing back down, disrupting their hold. Ultraman is revealed to be a Superman clone, and their final battle erupts. Meanwhile, in Baravia, Green Lantern and Hawk Girl arrive to save the day. So remember earlier when I said how can he be at two places at once? That's how. He can't be. He can't be at two places at once. He's not that quick. Um, so I thought that was nice. The music kind of comes, and then you see how the Baravia is about to invade Jarnpur, and at the last second, you have that one kid that's just like believes in Superman is going to save the day, and then you have that intro music that comes in, and Guy Gardner comes, and he's just like very cocky, saying like, "You got an upgrade, kid. You got us." That worked. That worked well for the film. I thought that was a nice element to add. Um, and then of course you have a Hawk Girl that takes out the president of Baravia in that funny sequence when he's just like, "Ah, you're just like or you're just like Superman. You're not gonna do anything to me." She's like, "I'm not like Superman," and then just drops him, which was a funny transition too, because I think it was like Alka Seltzer dropped in a cup in the
Yeah.
next scene or something.
Yeah.
Like that worked. But it did make me wonder though too, where okay, so here is the world that is upset with Superman because he interfered with the invasion to save humanity. And as Guy Gardner said it, they are of the cloth. But then you have Hawk Girl who can make that move and just drop this president, kill him, and nobody questions it or gets away. She gets away with it. Meanwhile, you've got Lex Luthor who's trying to orchestrate this whole get the Department of Justice to turn around him because they have to prove malicious intent. I mean, you can't get any more malicious than that. So it just kind of made me wonder. I was like, okay, like I think it added to the film. It's funny because you immediately get that sense of that's not the type of superhero she is, which I get. But I mean, I don't know. It kind of in a sense not following the logic of the same movie. You're
Mhm.
having one where you're holding one superhero accountable for just interfering and saving the world or saving these people, and you have another one and just pressed him up against a cactus, and then you have another one who just flat out killed the guy. So it kind of seems like, okay, well, where are we in this world? Because this has been going on apparently for a while. What are the consequences? Are there any consequences? I don't know. That was just my take. What about you, Matthias? It worked. It was funny. I just, you know.
Yeah, I mean the issue always with like films that are, comic book by nature and stuff like that, it's like when you start sort of inserting real world logic and stuff like that with it, it does get muddy. And also the movie more or less also kind of does that to itself to where it makes it a big sort of plot device to like, yeah, Superman doing the thing that he does is a problem. It's perceived as a problem, by, active governments and all that stuff there to where you don't know what actual side he's on, even though he says he's on the side of good. What are his motives? And of course the motives are all challenged ever since, the other sort of aspect of the film is the revelation of like his parents sending them there to conquer Earth as well.
Mhm.
I think what sort of kind of I guess gives Hawkgirl a little leeway, even though again I feel like, yeah, it's like you killing a president of a foreign nation that probably is going to get you locked up in in any sort of way. um I think considering the fact like they are then at that point sort of like in an active invasion of Jarhanpur, and later on you get a sense that Lex Luthor orchestrated this whole thing to, not only just punish Superman, but also kind of set up for like metahumans to also get in trouble or to sort of have more restrictions as well too. I think that's kind of what maybe a little bit kind of creates that element of like, well, what she did was kind of justified, but I still feel like that's another thing that kind of maybe in a future movie might be addressed a bit more. And even so, like one of the GOJ guys, towards the end of the film, whenever he talks to Rick Flag, he says like, the metahumans, they're making the rules now. So whether that sets up like an enduring conflict in the future, that's going to remain to be seen. It really depends on what kind of direction they take with this. But I do feel like something like that is going to be a major plot device or like a major part of the narrative for James Gunn's DC going forward, I think.
Yeah, and you hit on a good point there too, because that still brings in with Rick Flag Sr. It's unclear. There really isn't a clear connection of what is and what isn't a part of this DCU. Especially with if you're watching it and following it as closely as we are, folks. We had Creature Commandos. That was the first thing that launched the DCU, which mentions Clayface. but we've also got a Clayface movie coming out this October, which I'm wondering if that's going to be connected because Clayface did technically make an appearance in Creature Commandos. And then you've also got The Suicide Squad, which was directed by James Gunn, but from what I had understood, wasn't going to be part of the DCU, but kind of is because a plot point from there had Rick Flag Jr. Die, which is the basis of what was going on in Peacemaker season 2, which
Mhm.
also does lead to what we're talking about right now in terms of consequences and repercussions for dealing with metahumans. So I don't know. It's a little muddled, and I'm hoping that they're able to clear this up because, the 2 or 3 people that notice those sorts of things like you, me, and somebody else are
Yeah.
really gonna be disappointed and will ruin this whole film franchise before it jumps off the way. I mean, these are things that I talk about, but, if you're listening to this podcast, that's why you're listening to this podcast because you're listening to the people like us that do pay that close of attention to things, and believe it or not, there's people that pay even closer attention that are the podcasts and videos that I watch sometimes, but, um, I don't have that kind of time on my hands, folks, but it's just two guys talking about movies basically. But um those are just little things that kind of made me think a little bit as far as like what the future is going to hold with this. But all right, let's see. Scene 8. All right, during the battle of Ultraman and Superman, Lex finally shows all of his cards and reveals that the Baravia Jarhanpur conflict was actually orchestrated or created by him to gain the government's support to eliminate Superman. Envy ultimately drove Lex's motivations as he was jealous of Superman's strength simply being given to him and being fawned over because of it. Ultraman is defeated with the help of Crypto. Mr. Terrific closes the rift, and Lex Luthor is arrested after it's revealed of his covert involvement with Baravia, which, in the same fashion as the news reporting on the turn down Superman, this kind of story got reported as well because of basically Lois and Jimmy Olsen working together and then publishing the story, making it public. Um, a lot happens during this. I kind of summed it up real quick and tied it up with the bow, but yeah, so Superman defeats Ultraman. We get some passionate dialogue from Lex Luthor, basically just expressing all of his frustration and jealousy and envy of a superhuman being coming and essentially threatening he sees as threatening humanity, which kind of is in a way reminiscent of Batman in Batman versus Superman, or Bruce Wayne saying, if there's even a 1% chance that this person is going to turn on us, then we have to address it. He kind of came at it from a safety concern, and I think Lex kind of came at it from a jealousy slash using the whole safety concern as a motivation to get rid of someone. So they're kind of the same, maybe 50%. Maybe it's really just the whole safety aspect because I mean, Batman wasn't jealous of Superman; it was just a safety concern. But I kind of see that same undertone or underlying that idea of an outsider coming in and has all of this strength and ability, and we need to check that basically. Um, with Lex, this is another thing that works for some, but just didn't work for me. Where and he and Superman, or David Cornsweet's portrayal of Superman, kind of have this in common, where I feel like they aren't that they're not the mature versions of themselves yet, I guess. I don't see, from what I understand, Lex being that passionate and that uh I don't know, complaining, I guess, in a way. The Lex that I would see is someone who's a little bit more, or I would imagine was someone who was a little bit more confident, calm, cool, and collected. And this portrayal works overall. It did. He came off a little, you know, I lost my not I don't know, I was gonna say lost my toy and I want it back type of deal. Like a little I'm just gonna say complaining in a way, rather than just being cool, calm, and collected and moving on in his like the next phase of his plan, master plan type of deal. Um And I kind of got that vibe a little bit from Superman as well, this version of Superman as well. Like, it just, I don't know, the passion that he was putting kind of didn't come off as, he didn't really have as much charisma. I'll say. I think maybe that's what it is. This version of Superman was kind of lacking the charisma. He was a little, I don't want to say immature, but he's not quite established as that mature hero yet, I guess. Maybe he's on his way to that. I kind of hope we see that. But this Superman, just this version of him didn't come off as, he came off as a little too young at heart. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Um, and that's kind of the same thing that I got from both of their characters, that I just wasn't really too, it didn't really work for me. But I don't know. What's your takeaway from anything that I just said there, Matthias? If you disagree, by all means, share that.
Yeah, you're just wrong. So,
All right. Well, moving on. We're gonna
was-
go ahead and wrap things up,
but
folks.
but no. So I think, and I mean, you're touching on something too, where I mean, looking at, and I mean, well with talking about how people perceive this movie and how well this movie did. I think you're touching on something in terms of a lot of that has to do about people's perceptions of what Superman and company are supposed to be like, or what they're supposed to be portraying as. My take with this whole thing, and with this scene in particular, as you're kind of seeing Lex Luthor kind of tell Superman, like, yeah, the reason I'm like this is because of you, because I'm insecure with myself and I'm petty. And Superman goes back and kind of just says, yeah, it's like, I'm not perfect, I get scared, I'm this and I'm that, but at least I feel secure in myself in being a human, or at least being the best human that I can be. And I appreciate James Gunn's like interpretation of these characters, and like, yeah, they're imperfect souls. They're not confident. They're not, all powerful, all knowing. They're not one way or the other. They have their infallibilities as humans, because that's kind of the world that he wants to operate in. He doesn't want to have it to where it's like 1 degree in one direction or the other. He kind of wants to show those waves of humanity, those waves of behaviors that everybody else has. And I think for some people that speaks to, that speaks to what inner conflicts that they have, in real life, and how they operate, on a day-to-day basis, when it comes to themselves as human beings. And some people can see themselves whenever they hear those words coming from Superman's mouth or coming from Lex's mouth, because we all know of people who are well-meaning and are good people, but they have those characteristic flaws. Or we know people that are bullies, that are mean, but the reason they are that is because they're hiding those insecurities and they're taking it out on someone else. And I think it's a good way to sort of show those things, even within the context of like a comic book film, to show that, yeah, this can sort of transcend that barrier of real life into, fantasy. So I appreciate it. I like it. Does it stumble a little bit in sort of kind of getting that message out there? 100%. There's some of the dialogue there. It's a little too hokey for me to kind of really kind of like sink myself into it there. But I appreciate what they're doing with it. But I do certainly hope, like probably you do as well, that with Man of Tomorrow, that they probably dial that in a little bit more, and they kind of sort of show. I hope that there's a point in Man of Tomorrow to where they show the maturity of Lex Luthor as a villain, and same with Superman, the establishment of a sort of new level of maturity as a superhero. So I hope we get to see those elements of just how different are they going to be from this first film, and how is that going to influence like how they perceive things and what they do in the context of that story for that one. So, we'll see, and we'll see in about a year's time if, if it sticks that way.
Yeah, no, for sure we will. All right, let's see. The next scene and final, this is going to be it here. Superman, scene 9. Superman grants Lois an interview. They kiss. Or this is after everything has been settled, and they're on the street level. Superman grants Lois an interview. They kiss. She tells him that she loves him back because she didn't say it back earlier when he said it. She said that she loves him also. And then we are taken to the Fortress of Solitude for the final scene, where Kara Zor-El shows up to pick up Crypto. and footage of Clark's Earth parents, Ma and Pa Kent, and him growing up on the farm in Kansas, play while his injuries are being tended to by his androids. And we close out with the song Punk Rocker, which I thought was a really good ending to this film. Um, and I really loved that ending of showing him with his home planet, with his family, his Kansas based family. Um, as the new home videos for him. It helped to show a transition of the character as well. That was a nice element added overall. But any last comments about that scene, Matthias?
No, I mean it's they stuck the landing with that, honestly, with him sort of having that sense of like, yeah, my human parents are really what sort of made me me. And yeah, having that Iggy Pop song, Punk Rocker, fantastic way
Mhm.
to end it. But I think for me overall, this movie, even though it has missteps in terms of it being a little bloated at times, but also not being long enough to sort of really give our secondary characters in our story like room to breathe, I think overall it did what it needed to do in terms of set a tone and a direction for James Gunn's DC, I feel.
I think so too. It wasn't the perfect launch for this for me. It didn't meet my expectations, but will I throw this movie on to watch it randomly? Sure. So I think overall that's probably the biggest thing for me. I would like to have seen, I don't know, something else. I'm not a director, you know. I'm not a writer. I'm just the guy that watches movies. So speaking solely as a podcaster, I was hoping to see something a little different, but overall, like I said, it's a movie that I would still put on. So that's going to be it for the breakdown there, and that's going to bring us to our next portion here, which is best review, worst review. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with a random pulled review that we got from the internet for 10 out of 10. And this one is titled Snyder Fans Hate the Changes. Uh, some Snyder fans struggle to accept the new Superman because they are deeply attached to Zack Snyder's dark and realistic vision. Yet, this new version offers a different, brighter approach, closer to the classic spirit of the character. Instead of judging the film on its own merits, some criticize it primarily because it deviates from what they appreciate. Loving Snyder's version is legitimate, but rejecting any change can prevent one from appreciating new interpretations of Superman. I agree with this. I think this was a good. This person is somebody that obviously isn't going to be down talking to anybody that maybe did appreciate the Snyder version more than this one, i.e., me, but also is saying that, hey, you know, it's cool that you like that version, but also don't dislike this version just because it's not that version, which I agree with 100%. My it's whatever dissatisfaction with this film wasn't based because I wanted Snyder to continue or anything like that. By no means. But that said, I did appreciate this version. I just thinking that the tone would have been a little different than what they were going for ultimately, but it was what it
Mm.
was. So now we're gonna go with the worst review, which is a 1 out of 10. No soul to the movie and way too corny. I wanted to like it, but there are reasons for having a backstory. It creates a connection for the audience. When they are beat up or hurt, you're able to feel for them more. In my opinion, besides Lex's acting and computer lady and dude, the acting was mediocre at best. The animation was okay and the story wasn't bad, but I left not really that excited about the future of DC. Way too much screen time for his friends, and this version of Lois makes me feel nothing. The comedy moments weren't funny, and overall, a movie that gives this is a kids' movie and let's include a little bit of everything in it vibe, I guess. Oh, no, no vibe, just in it. He gave it a 1 out of 10, or she, I don't know. I pulled this one and I saw it, and it was something that I could see almost resembled part of or portions of what I thought as well. That said, I wasn't gonna, I don't give this a 1 out of 10. No, that's no. But I did see some of these things that I did agree with, which as far as like, you know, having that backstory and things like that, which goes back to what I stated earlier, involving this film. But it's a 1 out of 10, but it's not a overly exaggerated, I hate this just to hate this type of thing. I could respect some of the reasons that they, were dissatisfied with this one, but I don't know. Any comments about the, 2 reviews that we saw there, Matthias?
Yeah, I mean, the first one definitely touches on one aspect of this to where there seems to be a feud of like anybody who liked Man of Steel isn't allowed to like uh Gunn's Superman and vice
Mhm,
versa. But I think is that one thing that should be appreciated is like, yeah, there's strengths to both of those interpretations of Superman here. And I feel like you can honestly separate all that away, that sort of like weird online feud, and just look at this movie and be like, it's good. Like it has elements here that are different, of course, than what Snyder presents for Superman, but it doesn't take away anything too much. Like it's still in a sense Superman. It's it's the whole two cakes aspect. It's like, one cake is white cake, one cake is chocolate cake, but they're both cakes. And you should love cake. If you don't, then you're weird. But and then with the negative interview, it's like it is touching on some elements that even myself, who really, really, really like this film, I think I've seen it like 3 times already with 3 different people. Um, it is a little bloated at times. I feel that it doesn't really give a lot to sort of really tell the story that it needs to tell with all the other characters introduced. There could be more elements of the Daily Planet introduced. There could be more context to the Justice Gang introduced. There could have been, a montage or a little bit of backstory to how Superman essentially was able to kind of garner the trust and the respect of the people of Metropolis and, I guess overall the world as well too. Those things definitely I think were probably in the thought process or in the storyboarding of this movie, but just couldn't be made because of, it's just the movie was already kind of at capacity to begin with. But I
mhm.
think it is that whole sense of like, yeah, it feels like a movie that begins at the second act and it's a very big second act and then it just goes into a third, but there's a complete missing first. So yeah, I think both are valid in their own ways, but yeah, I guess now we talk about ours, right? How we feel.
Yeah, that's gonna bring us to our rating there, and, well, actually, first, I'm gonna go ahead and say, you know what? Yeah, I'll go ahead and just say the Rotten Tomatoes score for this, critics had it at an 83%, and this had an audience rating of 90%. I could see that. I totally understand why. I think that this movie overall was a good launch for the DCU. It wasn't a slam dunk. I think it got them rolling. Where it goes from here is gonna be anyone's guess because it's
Mhm.
way too early to tell. I think you need at least, I don't know, a good 5 movies out to be able to really gauge, okay, is this moving in the right direction or do we need to change trajectory a little bit? But anyways, that's going to bring us to our rating here. And our rating system is built on 5 different categories. We categorize story, performances, dialogue, production design, and entertainment value. Matthias and I will go ahead and proceed to give our feedback, our scores on what we think of these individuals, and at the end of it, these individual categories, and at the end of it all, we'll have one weighted average to represent a score of 1 to 5. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the scoring. So, for story, I went ahead and gave this a 3. Is where I feel pretty good with
Mm.
it. I feel that there was a little bit of uneven pacing, to be honest, and not to mention, like I said, starting off the story where it started with feeling like it started in the second act rather than develop a first, was one thing for me, and then as well as just feeling like there were a little too many subplots and not enough character development for as many characters as they included in this. But that's my take on that. Matthias, what is your take in story?
For me, I'm gonna give this a 4. I feel it is a mostly balanced movie overall. There, I did like the intro with Gunn, with sort of like Gunn's trying to essentially, kind of give an ideas to like what the universe he's building there. And I think overall it's a good story. I think it's a good introduction to Superman. It just, needs a little tweaks and tightens, hopefully for Man of Tomorrow. But yeah, I gave it a 4.
Okay, four is good. Four is good. That's going to bring us to performances. All right, performance wise, I actually gave this a four for performances. The performances that we got pretty much fit the characters that they developed. I wasn't too satisfied with the characters overall, but I feel like the performances were pretty on par with to create to establish the universe that they were developing. What about you, Matthias?
Yeah, I think a 4 is fair. I feel like everybody does understand their character really well. I think the standout for me is definitely Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. He was kind of one of those characters that really surprised me in terms of sort of like bringing that sort of dynamic ability to it. So, we'll see what happens to his character, in the future. Maybe he might get his own standalone movie. Who knows?
It's true. You know what? I said that. I'm gonna change this. I'm gonna change it to a 3.5. I second guessed it. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go 3.5. I don't think it was quite a four. All right. Let's see. Next thing, dialogue. Dialogue. I felt at times like the dialogue kind of was used to explain things a little bit more than just kind of letting the actions do
Mm.
the explaining. Like I said, actions speak louder than words, but in some cases, I felt like the dialogue was put there just to explain what was going on rather than just let the audience kind of trust the audience to figure it out in a way. Other things involved in that as well, but overall, I gave the dialogue a three. What about you, Matthias?
Yeah, I think 3 is what I'm going to give it as well too. There's some good standout lines that sort of give you the tone of the film there, but there is some over explaining going on and then just sort of like more comic booky writing kind of sort of leaking into the script. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think 3 is fair.
Okay. Production design. This is one of the shining aspects of this film, I thought. The world building was great, and I feel like it really contributed to the environment that supported the overall story that they were telling. So for this, I gave it a four, actually.
Same here, 4. Yeah, so I think really strong world building, really great set designs and all that stuff. It feels like a tangible comic book world. So
Yeah, yeah. And dialogue, I forgot. You said a three as well, right?
yeah, I said 3.
Okay. Entertainment value. I think that it was overall, I feel like it was fun at heart. I'm sorry, it was a fun movie, very heartfelt, but it wasn't really consistently thrilling, if I'm being completely honest on that. So with that, I give it a three. What about you, Matthias?
I gave it a 4. I think some of the action sequences are really well done. Even the low points or the sort of like dialogue heavy points, I think are still entertaining. Once you kind of get an understanding of the characters and all that stuff there. The only thing that really kind of puts this down a little bit from like a perfect score would just be like, yes, some of the length of it is a little bit all over the place, and it isn't something. I guess the length definitely kind of makes it a little bit less than perfect. I guess I would say.
Okay. Well, combined for us, puts this movie on a scale of 1 to 5 at a 3.54, which I kind of feel pretty comfortable with. I think that that pretty much sums up how I feel about this movie. Um, it wasn't a five, definitely wasn't a failure, wasn't a one, close to a four if you round up. I mean, if you look at it that way. But
Mhm.
overall, I think I'm satisfied with a 3.54. What about you?
No, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the average of what I looked up on Letterbox as well too. I think the average is 3.8 there, so pretty
Oh, there
much
you
what
go.
everybody else is feeling. So there we go.
All right. Well, all right, folks. And just like that, our time is up. But as always, we want to thank you all for listening to us, whether it be on your day off or your commute to work. We appreciate you taking the time to hit download or push play on your device. We also want to remind you, if you're not already, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Second Way to Kill Werewolf, where we encourage you to share your thoughts and opinions on the many, many posts that we put up. Also, if you enjoyed the show, be sure to share it with a friend. It really does help us out more than you could ever know. That said, I'm Damien,
And I'm Matthias.
and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.